A lot of Christians don't seem to know or understand that among all the world's great religions, Christianity is the only one which was founded on a verifiable, historical, public fact. My name is Bruce Phillips. I've been at Eastside since the early 90s. I grew up in rural Long Island, and we went to a small Presbyterian church where my father was an elder. And though I was confirmed at the age of 13, the preaching was rather lackluster. Of more importance to my spiritual formation was a summer camp I used to go to, where I came back full of all kinds of enthusiasm for my spiritual life, but back in the secular world and the lackluster preaching, and that often went away fairly quickly. A friend from my hometown took his own life, unfortunately, and that raised a lot of questions. And the pastor from my boyhood years resigned, not just from our church, but also from the pastorate in general. And on the way out the door, he seemed to indicate that he'd been going through the motions for many years. And I thought, well, that explains a lot of things. And so, like the decision to become a French major, I made another quick decision, which was to walk away from my faith. My company wasn't doing terribly well, and that produced a certain amount of concern. And I'd been outside the States for a long time. I'd never really worked in the commercial world or the business world inside the States. So if something happened to my job and I had to go back to the States, I wasn't sure where I was going to find work. The markets crashed in '87. We lost a certain amount of investment income. And it just was a time where I began to have a lot of anxiety. Nothing I ever sought a doctor for, but just something that I carried with me. I was concerned about everything. I'm the kind of guy who lies awake at night and wonders about the meaning of life. And at that point, I came across a book which purported to tell the sort of secular materialist worldview story, the history of the universe. I thought, aha, this is really going to settle a lot of my questions. So I read it. And Pamela said I was so depressed when I got through because it had no answers, and it just raised a lot of terrible questions. So about that time, the company decided that this software company in Atlanta, that they weren't going to be able to keep expensive expatriates overseas anymore, and that my next job with them was going to be in Atlanta. So we packed up everything and shipped everything across the Atlantic Ocean and settled into a subdivision in East Cobb. Very shortly after we arrived, the company was bought by a competitor, and not too long after that, there was a tremendous downsizing, and I got to understand what it's like to be in unemployment and job placement in an economy that you don't know when the economy is sort of on its back as well. It was not a happy time. And but at this time, we had really considered ourselves to be kind of seekers. We were thinking that there might be answers to the questions that we had, and maybe that we would find that back in a religious environment somehow. We read everything in sight, and sometimes very indiscriminately. I sort of cringe at some of the things we read in those days. But it was a mixed up atmosphere that we were living in, and into this came Bob and Denise Wright and their family. Denise and Bob's oldest daughter, Melissa, was a good friend of my second daughter, Kate's, at the local elementary school, and invited Kate to bring a friend night at the kids' choir. Pamela asked me, well, is that okay if they go? And she goes, and I said, well, what are these people like? And she said, well, they seem okay to me. I said, fine. We literally didn't even know where this church was. And the reason I know this is because when the invitation came to come to Eastside to hear them sing, we had to ask Denise for driving directions to how to get there. And I'll never forget it. We sat down in front. If you're sitting on the stage, you look down on the left. We were in the first row. They brought the kids out. The kids sang. And in the commotion which ensued when they took the kids off the stage, we just quietly got up in our corner and walked out. We considered ourselves seekers, but I wasn't really ready to give a Baptist pastor 30 minutes of unanswered airtime. But we started coming back to Eastside. We came to some of the high feasts and holy days. And we started to come on a more regular basis, and we would often leave on Sundays with sort of tears in our eyes. And we were sort of moving toward this decision point in our lives as to whether it's something to which we wanted to make a commitment. Pamela was the first to do so. I was traveling by that time with a management consulting firm and away, on the road 4 nights a week. And in a phone call one evening, she said, guess what? I've been baptized. I said, wow, that's really great. I know we talked about it. We never really set a date or anything. And that got me thinking, and within a couple of weeks, and maybe a month later, I was in a hotel in Westchester, New York, and I turned over and I did something I hadn't done for 25 years. I called on God. And I'd been told he'd be there. But I had to start by saying, I'm the guy that's been turning my back on you for 25 years, and I hope you're still there. And he was. And it's led to a family of 4 children, born-again believers, Christian families. It's been an absolutely wonderful journey. But there was still one more speed bump in my life as far as this one's concerned, and that was that I was a wannabe scientist growing up as a child, and so I sort of had a certain empathy in my life for science. And so I thought, well, this is a bigger question than just evolution. This is a bigger question about all of the points of view and perspectives that I have from the years that I spent as a secular materialist. And how was I going to reconcile those with my Christian life? And so, like I do with everything else in life, I started to read. And I discovered Christian apologetics. If you don't know what Christian apologetics is, it's the attempt to create a rational perspective, or why it is that the Christian faith is rational. Why is it that we should believe? Why should it appeal to your intellect as much as it appeals to your emotions? It comes from 1 Peter 3:15, which says, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks for the hope that is in you. And those words, to give a response, to give an answer in the Greek, is apologion, which is what we get the word of Christian apologetics from. What I do know is that it's a lifelong journey that I'm on, and it gives me a great deal of joy. So let me leave you with a verse. I'm sometimes a little skeptical of life verses. I think people pick the verse they like the most and make that their life verse, but mine, I think, fits very well with my background. In Philippians, I think it's Philippians 4:6, Paul says to the Philippians, he says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, bring your requests to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will be in your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Absence of anxiety, the coming of peace and joy, those are things which I think come with you with the Christian life, with an attitude of thankfulness. That phrase, with thankfulness, is so important. I had made a kind of an intellectual commitment to the gospel and to Christ. But as I began to supplement that with faith, and by faith I mean trusting in it, trusting that I could give over my problems to God and He would take care of them, that anxiety was replaced with hope and joy. I'm Bruce Phillips, and this is my story.